The sun burns low over endless plains. The wind whispers through tall grass, and somewhere in the distance, the sound of hooves breaks the silence. This is where legends were born. They called them cowboys, men of grit and courage who lived where law was scarce and danger never slept. But behind the wide-brimmed hat and the calm stare lies something deeper, the true story of survival, hardship, and freedom carved from the wildest land on earth. Welcome to the world of the Wild West, the image of freedom in its simplest form, and the symbol of courage in the face of a harsh and untamed nature. But behind the wide-brimmed hat and the galloping horse lies another story, one of toil and endurance, of danger and solitude, of a world that forged its own legends. In this documentary, we leave behind the noise of cities and ride together into the Wild West. We will follow the footsteps of those men who became global icons and discover how their hard work turned into a living legend that still inspires films and stories today. When European settlers first set foot in the New World in the 16th century, they brought with them their customs and ways of life. They came to a vast continent filled with endless pastures and herds of wild cattle roaming freely. The land was fertile but untamed, waiting for someone to master it. Here, the seed was planted that would one day grow into the legend of the cowboy. The Spanish colonists brought their horses, animals the native peoples had never seen before. On these horses, Spanish farmers and adventurers began to manage the wide lands. These men were known as vaqueros. They were experts in raising cattle and in using long ropes to control stray calves. They were not merely herdsmen. They were true masters of horseback riding and livestock handling. Over the years, the skills of the vaqueros spread northward into what would later become the United Way. In the 17th and 18th centuries, these traditions merged with the realities of the American frontier. It was a hard land, the climate unforgiving, the paths unmarked. Settlers needed strong men capable of facing nature and protecting their herds. From this need, a new way of life was born, one that combined the expertise of the vaqueros with the European dream of freedom in the New World. In states like Texas, the first true cowboys appeared. From sunrise to sunset, they rode across vast lands, driving cattle for hundreds of miles. They lived in isolation, far from cities, surrounded only by sky and open plains. Their lives were harsh, yet they created an image of a lifestyle unlike anything the world had seen before. The cowboy was not born in a single moment. He was shaped through centuries of cultural exchange. The Spaniards who planted the seed, the Mexicans who refined the craft, and the settlers who turned it into a symbol of boundless freedom. He was the true son of adventure, born out of necessity, raised by struggle, and immortalized as the spirit of liberty. When we hear the word cowboy today, our minds return to those early days, where civilizations met on open prairies, and a legend was born that would forever define the American West. As dawn breaks, the cowboy wakes from a brief sleep under the open sky or inside a wooden cabin. There is no time for reflection. The day begins early. He tightens his belt, checks his horse, his closest companion, and prepares for another long day. To the cowboy, the horse is not just an animal, but a part of his life, his freedom, his survival. Before the sun fully rises, he readies his saddle, ropes, and simple provisions that will sustain him through the day. There is no rest in this life, only motion across endless plains. With the rhythm of hooves striking the earth, the long day begins. His first task is to gather the cattle that strayed overnight. A sharp whistle or a swing of his rope brings them back into line. Sometimes there are dozens of cattle, sometimes hundreds, all moving slowly through clouds of dust. He must stay alert. No angry bull or runaway calf can escape his eyes. The day is not easy. The summer sun burns his back until his skin blends with the color of the land. In winter, the cold bites at his hands and face, yet he must keep going. Rain, wind, or snow, nothing stops the cowboy's day. He rides for miles, watching the herd, making sure no predator or thief comes near. By sunset, he returns to camp, ties the cattle within a safe boundary, and lights a fire. Dinner is simple: beans, dry bread, or salted meat. They talk for a while, maybe play the harmonica, then sleep beneath the stars. This was the cowboy's life: constant vigilance, hard work, and days spent more on horseback than on the ground. They knew no comfort like city folk, but they knew freedom in every breath of prairie air. Over time, the tools of their trade became symbols of their identity: the iron-heeled boots, armor against thorns and rock; the spurs, a gentle guide for the horse; the wide-brimmed hat, not just for shade but for scooping water or fanning a fire; the lasso, their weapon and tool, a mark of skill and control. These simple objects, the hat, the boots, and the rope, became cultural icons, representing strength and self-reliance. But life on the range was never safe. Storms, wild animals, and bandits were constant threats. Lightning could send hundreds of cattle stampeding in chaos. In winter, blizzards buried entire herds under snow. Wolves, cougars, and bears prowled the night, and sometimes the greatest danger came from other men, rustlers who stole cattle under the cover of darkness. Through it all, the cowboy relied on instinct, courage, and cooperation with fellow riders. Bravery wasn't for glory, it was for survival. Yet the Wild West was not just about men. Women, too, played vital roles, on the ranch, in towns, and on the frontier. They worked alongside men, tending cattle, cooking for the herders, raising children in a harsh land. Some became skilled riders and sharpshooters, proving their strength and courage. Others built the foundations of civilization, as teachers, doctors, and caretakers. Their presence turned dusty outposts into real communities. As time passed, change swept across the plains. Railroads replaced long cattle drives. Barbed wire fenced off the open range. The age of the cowboy began to fade, replaced by farms, cities, and modern life. But the spirit of the cowboy never died. It lived on in stories, songs, and, eventually, in the magic of cinema. From early silent films like The Great Train Robbery, 1903, to classics starring John Wayne, and later the spaghetti westerns of Sergio Leone and Clint Eastwood, the cowboy became a global icon. He stood for freedom, honor, and the eternal fight between law and chaos. Even today, more than a century later, the cowboy remains a timeless symbol of adventure, resilience, and the wild beauty of an untamed land. When the wind moves through the grass or a distant horse's hooves echo against the horizon, it feels as though his spirit still rides there, between dust and memory, between truth and legend.